CTV News at 5 with Hudson Mack.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. In cities and towns across the country today, First Nations people and their supporters took to the streets in a national day of action in the Idle No More movement. They rallied and drummed and sang and prayed together, blockaded roads and railways and border crossings, and they say they're going to keep it up until the country hears their message. On Vancouver Island, First Nations people and their supporters blockaded the Pat Bay Highway, closing it for nearly an hour. Hundreds more protested in Windsor at the foot of Canada's busiest border crossing, the Ambassador Bridge, blocking traffic to the U.S. side. In Manitoba, a small group blocked the CN main line at Portage-la Prairie. As for the protest on Vancouver Island, it went off without a hitch, and as CTV's Stephanie Sherlock reports, that may not be a good thing for Idle No More. A BC Ferries crew narrowly avoided a hard landing at Duke Point after the Coastal Inspiration ran into motor trouble as it pulled into port. The crew was able to have the ship towed into its berth safely on Monday afternoon. 6 sailings were then cancelled on the route between Duke Point and Tsawwassen as the problem was fixed. You may recall in December of 2011, the same ferry crashed into the dock at Duke Point, doing $3 million in damage. But BC Ferries says the two incidents are not related.
At no time was the crew worried about safety of the vessel or the passengers, most importantly, or themselves. This was, as they realized they weren't going to get their full engaged propulsion, it was a precautionary thing. They held off, they assessed, and when the time came, they had a tug to assist them in their docking just to make sure that it was going to be the right speed, the right safety. And it was a normal unload. Vehicles unloaded fine, passengers walked off, and the vessel went and repaired, and it was all good.
Ferries says it was able to get the problem fixed by Monday night, and the ship is now back in service. Records released by BC Ferries show the environmental concerns about the sunken Queen of the North have eased. When the ferry sank off Gill Island in 2006, diesel fuel began leaking to the surface. Records obtained through a Freedom of Information application show that the ship's fuel tanks imploded when the Queen of the North sank. The report says pockets of fuel trapped in the superstructure of the ship could still leak, but the risk of contamination to shellfish in that area is considered to be low. Well, health officials are calling this year's dominant flu strain the worst they have seen since 2009. And as many of you are feeling the effects, it is still going strong across the country, especially here in British Columbia. The provincial health officer says the flu has hit virtually every region of BC, and this could be the highest spread of flu he has seen in 10 years. One of the region's hardest hit is Metro Vancouver. Doctors at the Fraser Health Authority have imposed special measures to try to keep it from spreading and have now declared the flu outbreak to be a hazard.
It's affecting a lot of individuals, a fair amount of workplace absenteeism. We're seeing pressures on the emergency rooms, and we're seeing outbreaks in long-term care facilities where our most vulnerable members of the population are residing. So that's causing some concern, particularly in the Fraser, for high levels of illness and an excess number of deaths over previous years.
Health officials say it is difficult to track which deaths were caused directly by the flu, but this year's strain is especially bad, and they're recommending that if you have flu-like symptoms, you stay home, and everybody should wash their hands frequently and vigorously. And for those who haven't had one, they should get a flu shot. No coincidence of timing here. The National Rifle Association is fighting back with a shot at the security of President Obama's daughters. An ad released today online is sparking harsh criticism from those who say it's crossing the line. The White House says most Americans agree that a president's children should not be pawns in a political fight. They say the ad is repugnant and cowardly. The NRA says whoever thinks the ad is about the president's daughters misses the point entirely. The NRA says the ad is about keeping children safe. A former firearms manager at Island Outfitters in Victoria has been sentenced to 2 years in prison for 7 gun-related crimes. 41-year-old Lucky Jagra pleaded guilty to those charges Tuesday. Among the charges are stealing restricted firearms and selling stolen restricted firearms. The judge has also imposed a lifetime ban on Jagra possessing firearms or restricted weapons. The court records show Jagra started work at Island Outfitters in 2008. In February 2012, a general audit revealed the thefts, and by that time, Jagra had stolen 148 guns worth about $215,000. The court was told he had sold more than a dozen of them. Well, the province is reviewing its drunk driving laws in the face of a number of court challenges. They come from drivers who faced stiff penalties after being stopped for impaired driving. The Justice Minister says the review will include 1,200 cases of people who were handed roadside driving bans in November 2011, which was just before the BC Supreme Court struck down part of that law. There are big problems tonight for Boeing's troubled Dreamliner passenger jets. They have been ordered grounded in the U.S. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, as well as 2 Japanese airlines, have grounded the Boeing 787. The move comes after an ANA Dreamliner was forced to make an emergency landing in western Japan this morning. A cockpit alarm showed battery problems and there was a burning smell in the cockpit. Everybody got off the plane safely, but it's the second time in 2 weeks that a smoking or burning battery has been tied to an emergency on board a 787. Air Canada is scheduled to take delivery of the Dreamliner next year. United is the only American airline that flies them right now and has 6 in its fleet. Premier Christy Clark is offering an extension to the Auditor General, stretching the current term from 6 years to 8. And the Premier also says the process for selecting the Auditor General needs to be improved. A committee of 5 MLAs recently voted not to extend John Doyle's appointment as the Auditor General, but this morning, Clark says she wants Doyle to stay on for 2 more years. She says an 8-year mandate would be long enough for the Auditor General to do a good job, and a single term would also prevent the political debate and perception of conflict of interest when it comes time to renew.
I do not believe it's the right process when we have independent officers of the legislature like this one, who are in a natural conflict with the government, to every 6 years be coming in and perhaps asking to have their job back. I think it creates a difficult conflict.
Clark says her government will introduce legislation next month that will change the term to 8 years, and she wants Doyle's term to reflect that. BC's term would then move closer to the federal Auditor General term of 10 years. Now, more on a developing labor story in Greater Victoria tonight. Word came late today that there's a tentative deal to end the long-running labor dispute at BC Transit. Transit and the union that represents its drivers and mechanics have come to a tentative agreement after Transit backed down on a major sticking point. It was the trial phase of the new vicinity buses, which would have been operated by drivers working for lower wages. Transit has now decided to move this trial to areas outside Greater Victoria. The 2 sides will work out details of the agreement in the next few days, and then comes ratification. But job action will end now, and the 1-day strike, a full shutdown scheduled for Tuesday of next week, has been canceled. Well, Thrifty Foods has broken a record with its 6-week Food for Families campaign, bringing in more than $274,000 for island food banks. A good portion of it, more than $87,000, went to the mustard seed. The food bank says this money will help it spread the food throughout the year. To cash in, the food bank can go to the Thrifty Foods warehouse and pick up orders as needed to help keep the food fresh and nutritious.
So rather than plug up our warehouses with product that would diminish over time, we're acting a little bit smarter nowadays. We buy when it's required, week to week.
I think this is a good start. I know they did really well during Christmas, so their coffers are full right now, but it goes really fast.
Food for Families benefits 16 food banks, including the Goldstream Food Bank, the Sydney Lions Food Bank, and the Loaves and Fishes Community Food Bank in Nanaimo as well. A man was killed in the Comox Valley last night in a crash involving a pickup truck and a motorcycle. The collision happened at about 5:30 at the intersection of 29th Street and Cliff Avenue in Courtenay. When the first responders got to the scene, they found the motorcyclist suffering life-threatening injuries. Paramedics performed CPR at the scene, then rushed the 36-year-old Comox Valley man to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. RCMP say the pickup was trying to turn left onto 29th and drove right into the path of the oncoming motorbike.
So we have been speaking with a variety of witnesses. We've collected statements last night, and we're also looking for anyone to come forward that may have seen the motorcycle in the minutes leading up to the collision.
The driver of the pickup was not injured. RCMP are continuing to investigate. They have not said whether speed was a factor. No word on charges yet. Businesses that were victimized in a massive shoplifting ring in Nanaimo that we showed you last night are now being reunited with their property. A tip led police to a home in the 1900 block of Prince Charles in the Cedar area. Officers raided the home, and when they got inside, they say they found enough merchandise to stock a department store. Clothing and other goods worth $22,000 or more than that. Nearly a dozen stores had been targeted in the theft ring, including Blue Notes in Nanaimo, which was able to reclaim some of its stolen merchandise, but there is still plenty of sorting to do for police and the stores.
The only problem is with it being done all over the island, it could have been from other stores. It might not have been just from our store, like, because we have one in Victoria as well. So it could have been stolen from ours, but it might not have been.
4 people were charged in the case.